Most people don't lose their dignity all at once. It doesn't happen in a single dramatic moment. It happens slowly, quietly. Through small agreements we never remember signing. A lowered expectation here, a silent acceptance there. Until one day you realize you've been giving your best and receiving what's left over. Here's the uncomfortable truth few talk about. The world doesn't discard people because they are weak. It discards them because it no longer knows how to recognize value beyond usefulness. And once usefulness becomes the only currency, compassion turns optional, loyalty becomes forgettable, and dignity starts to feel negotiable. That's why this story matters. Because it's not really about a poor worker or an old horse. It's about a system we've all been part of, sometimes as victims, sometimes as silent witnesses. It's about how easy it is to confuse opportunity with humiliation, and how often we're told to be grateful for things that slowly erase our self-respect. Here's the paradox. The moments that look like the end are often the beginning of a different kind of power. Not the loud kind, not the kind that dominates, but the kind that realigns you with who you are before the world told you who to be. This story challenges a belief many people carry without questioning. That value must be proven constantly, that rest equals laziness, that age means irrelevance, that if something or someone no longer produces, it no longer deserves care. And yet, the most important things in life rarely prove themselves through speed or profit. They prove themselves through presence. If you've ever felt overlooked, underpaid, underestimated, or quietly replaced, this story is for you. If you've ever stayed silent because speaking up felt too expensive, this story is for you. And if you've ever wondered whether choosing kindness in a harsh world makes you foolish, you'll want to listen closely. Because what you're about to hear isn't a motivational speech. It's a mirror, one that asks a simple but dangerous question. What if the thing you were told was useless is exactly what carries the greatest purpose? As you watch, I invite you to do 3 simple things, not out of obligation but alignment. First, like this video, so this message reaches people who need it more than algorithms. Second, subscribe to the channel, because stories like this don't just entertain, they rebuild perspective. And third, share this with someone who's been treated like they no longer matter. You might be the reminder they didn't know they needed. Stay with this story. Not because it promises instant justice, but because it reveals something far more enduring. How dignity is lost, how it's restored, and how sometimes the world's greatest lessons arrive disguised as its cruelest decisions. And it all begins with a deal that looked fair on paper, but carried a cost no one talked about. Manuel had learned over the years that injustice rarely arrives screaming. Most of the time, it shows up wearing clean clothes, holding papers, speaking calmly, pretending to be fair. That morning felt no different at first. The contract was ending, just like many others had ended before. Years of loyalty, early mornings, aching backs, and silent obedience were suddenly summarized into a few cold numbers scribbled on a sheet of paper. No gratitude, no acknowledgement, just calculations. And calculations, when used without conscience, have a way of shrinking human beings into costs. The deductions came one after another, small on paper, heavy in reality. A fee here, a maintenance cost there, a charge Manuel had never agreed to, explained with a shrug and a tone that said, "That's just how things are." The final amount was lower than promised, lower than fair, and far lower than the value of the years he had poured into that land. Still, Manuel didn't protest, not because he didn't understand the injustice, but because he had learned that arguing with power often costs more than silence. What made it worse wasn't the money, it was the setting. Other workers nearby, half smiles, curious eyes pretending not to stare. The humiliation wasn't shouted, it was displayed. And humiliation, when done publicly, doesn't need insults. It just needs witnesses. Then came the final gesture, the so-called gift. The old mare, Canella, thin, tired, past her prime, standing there like a leftover no one wanted to deal with. The owner pointed at her casually, as if pointing at broken equipment. The sentence that followed landed like a dull blade. No drama, no emotion, just cruelty disguised as logic. She's useless now, just like you. Here's the part most people miss. Moments like this aren't rare exceptions. They're patterns. The world has an odd habit of calling humiliation an opportunity, of framing disrespect as generosity, of offering leftovers and expecting gratitude in return. Manuel wasn't just being underpaid, he was being taught a lesson the system loves to teach. Your value ends when your usefulness does. Many watching this story have felt something similar. A job that slowly erased dignity. A relationship where effort was repaid with silence. A situation where saying thank you felt mandatory, even when something inside screamed, "This isn't right." The injustice didn't explode, it settled quietly, like dust. And yet, something subtle happens in moments like these, a fork in the road no one else sees. Because injustice doesn't just test patience, it tests identity. It asks a silent question: who are you when the world tells you you're worth less than you know you are? Manuel's answer wouldn't come in words, not yet. It would come in the way he chose to walk away, and in what, or rather who, walked beside him. Manuel didn't raise his voice. He didn't clench his fists. He didn't deliver a speech that would later be repeated by others. And that, oddly enough, was the most unsettling part, because when someone truly understands the weight of an injustice, they don't always react with noise. Sometimes they react with movement, quiet movement, purposeful movement. He took the rope in his hands and turned toward Canela. The old mare barely lifted her head. Her legs trembled, not dramatically, but in that honest way that reveals exhaustion rather than injury. Manuel adjusted the knot slowly, almost ceremonially, as if acknowledging something no one else was willing to see. Then he began to walk. The path home wasn't long, but it felt endless. Dust clung to their steps, rising and settling with every movement. They stopped often, not because Manuel was impatient, but because he was attentive. A pause for water, a pause for breath, a pause for shade where shade barely existed. When Canella struggled, he waited. When she hesitated, he didn't pull. He adapted his pace to hers, not the other way around. That walk was a decision, a quiet one, but firm. Many people think strength looks like confrontation. Sometimes it does. But there's another kind of strength, one that refuses to perform, one that doesn't need an audience. Manuel chose not to argue, not because he agreed with what had been done to him, but because he understood something deeper. Arguing would have kept him tied to the injustice. Walking away, on his own terms, gave him something far more valuable: control over who he would become next. Here's where the story quietly mirrors real life. How many times has someone been tempted to react just to be seen, to say something sharp, just to feel momentarily powerful? Yet, wisdom often whispers instead of shouts. And those who learn to listen to that whisper tend to make decisions that last longer than applause. On that dusty road, something else was happening. Two beings the world had labeled as finished were moving forward together, not fixing each other, not saving each other, just choosing not to abandon one another. There's a rare dignity in that kind of companionship. It doesn't depend on strength or usefulness, it depends on presence. If you've ever walked away from a place where you were tolerated but not respected, you know this feeling. The mix of relief and uncertainty, the strange calm that follows a painful ending. The quiet voice asking, "What now?" Manuel didn't have an answer yet, but he had direction. And sometimes, Direction matters more than clarity. That walk wasn't heroic. No one applauded. No one filmed it, but it planted something subtle inside him, a shift from reacting to choosing, from enduring to aligning, and that shift, although invisible at the time, would soon reveal its weight in ways neither he nor anyone else could have predicted. Because when a person chooses compassion in a moment where bitterness would be easier, they unknowingly step onto a path where value begins to redefine itself. And that path was just beginning to test him. Kindness is often praised in speeches, quoted in books, and admired from a safe distance. But when kindness starts to cost something real, time, comfort, money, pride, it suddenly becomes inconvenient. That was the kind of kindness Manuel was practicing now. The kind that doesn't generate applause, doesn't show immediate returns, and definitely doesn't look smart to people watching from the outside. Manuel's days became simpler and harder at the same time. Simpler because his focus narrowed, harder because resources were thin. He shared what little food he had. When there wasn't enough grain, he improvised. When medicine wasn't available, he turned to old remedies, herbs he had learned about from older workers, techniques passed down quietly, the kind of knowledge that never makes it into manuals but survives through experience. None of it was glamorous. None of it guaranteed success. People noticed, and people talked. Sell her while you still can. Trade her for something younger. Why waste effort on what's already done? Those voices weren't cruel. That's what made them dangerous. They sounded reasonable, practical, logical, and logic, when stripped of compassion, can talk anyone into abandoning what still deserves care. This is where many people quit, not because they're bad, but because they're tired, because results aren't visible yet, because kindness hasn't paid back fast enough. Manuel felt that temptation too. He wasn't immune to doubt. At night, when exhaustion settled into his bones, the question crept in quietly. What if they're right? But here's the subtle truth most don't talk about. Real value often grows underground first, and anything growing underground looks, from the surface, like nothing is happening at all. Manuel kept going, not out of blind optimism, but out of alignment. Something inside him refused to measure worth solely by productivity. He understood, perhaps without putting it into words, that character is built precisely in moments where quitting would be justified. Anyone can care when it's convenient. Few do when it costs them sleep, comfort, or approval. For the viewer, this moment carries a practical lesson. If you're caring for someone or something that doesn't pay back yet, you're not foolish. You're early. Whether it's an elderly parent, a struggling project, a neglected skill, or even your own healing, the absence of immediate results doesn't mean absence of progress. It often means depth is forming where no one is looking. Manuel wasn't trying to be noble. He was simply refusing to become the kind of person who abandons what the world labels as a loss. And in doing so, he unknowingly positioned himself for a revelation that logic alone could never predict. Because sometimes what doesn't generate profit generates perspective, and perspective, when the moment demands it, can be worth far more than money. Soon, very soon, that quiet perseverance would be tested. Not in private, but in a moment where hesitation could cost far more than effort ever did. And when that moment arrived, it wouldn't ask whether kindness was profitable. It would ask whether it had prepared him to see what others couldn't. Miracles rarely arrive the way people expect them to. They don't usually come with light from the sky or dramatic announcements. More often, they come disguised as discomfort, intuition, or a quiet insistence that something isn't right. That night, Manuel felt it before he understood it. Not fear exactly, something subtler, a tension in the air, a restlessness that didn't belong to him alone. Canella sensed it first, Her breathing changed. Her ears stayed alert. She shifted her weight again and again, unable to settle. Then came the sound, not loud, not frantic, but persistent. A low, insistent whinny that cut through the stillness of the night. Manuel sat up. He didn't dismiss it. He had learned, through years of working with animals, that panic is different from warning. Panic screams. Warning insists. Canella was insisting. Here's where many would have hesitated. After all, she was old, tired, labeled useless by people who considered themselves experienced. Trusting her meant risking embarrassment. It meant acting without proof. It meant moving when everyone else was sleeping peacefully. Convinced that tomorrow would be just another ordinary day, Manuel trusted her anyway. That decision didn't come from impulse. It came from attention, from months of listening when others would have ignored, from choosing care over convenience again and again. When he followed Canella's agitation toward the hillside near the village, he wasn't thinking about heroism. He was thinking about responsibility, about the strange feeling that ignoring this moment would cost more than acting on it. The ground trembled shortly after, not violently at first, just enough to make the truth undeniable. A section of land began to give way. What could have turned into a disaster while people slept became an urgent warning instead. Manuel ran. He knocked on doors. He shouted names. Others followed his lead, confused at first, then alarmed. Children were carried out. Elderly neighbors helped. People moved uphill just in time. By morning, the damage was visible, and so was the miracle. No one celebrated Canella as a prophet, no one called Manuel a savior, and yet everyone knew something undeniable had happened. What was dismissed as useless had been essential. What was ignored had been vital. The very thing people had laughed at had quietly prevented loss. Here's the deeper truth beneath the event. The miracle wasn't just the warning. The miracle was the preparation. Manuel had become the kind of person capable of recognizing it. Most people don't miss miracles because they're blind. They miss them because they've trained themselves to ignore anything that doesn't fit their expectations. For the viewer, this moment carries a powerful application. Intuition sharpens when compassion is practiced. Awareness grows when attention is given. If you want clarity in critical moments, it's built long before the moment arrives, through patience, humility, and listening when it feels inconvenient. Canella didn't suddenly become valuable that night. She had been valuable all along. The difference was that someone finally trusted what the world had dismissed. And once a community witnesses that kind of reversal, once they see that what they called useless can save them, their certainty begins to crack. That crack would soon widen into something even more uncomfortable for those who thought they knew how value worked. Recognition has a peculiar way of changing people. Some chase it their entire lives, others are quietly undone by it when it finally arrives. Manuel belonged to neither group. What happened after the warning didn't turn him into someone new. It simply revealed who he had been all along. At first, the shift in the village was subtle. Conversations changed tone. Where there had once been indifference, there was now curiosity. People who had walked past Canella without a glance began to slow down. Children pointed, elders nodded with a mix of gratitude and disbelief. The old mare, once invisible, had become a symbol. Not because she sought attention, but because her existence now carried meaning. Donations began to appear quietly. A bag of grain left near Manuel's door. A blanket folded without explanation. No speeches, no ceremonies, just small gestures from people who had realized something important too late. Goodness deserves support, not skepticism. What's worth noting here is that Manuel never adjusted his behavior to match the recognition. He didn't tell the story louder. He didn't correct people when they exaggerated details. He didn't turn gratitude into currency. That restraint mattered because recognition, when mishandled, can corrupt even the purest intentions. Manuel understood, perhaps intuitively, that turning the miracle into a transaction would diminish its meaning. This moment holds a lesson many overlook. When good returns to you without being asked for, the temptation is to monetize it, to measure it, to control it. But true recognition is not something you leverage. It's something you steward. It's a responsibility, not a reward. The children, especially, gravitated toward the story. They asked questions. They wanted to know why Manuel hadn't sold Canella earlier, why he trusted her, why he didn't walk away. Their curiosity wasn't innocent, it was formative. These weren't just questions about a horse, they were questions about values. And every answer, even the quiet ones, planted seeds. Manuel never preached, he simply told the truth, that care doesn't always make sense immediately, that listening matters, that sometimes the weakest voice carries the most important warning. In doing so, he became something unexpected, a reference point, a living example that contradicted the shortcuts the world often promotes. For anyone watching, this stage of the story offers reassurance. If you've done good quietly and wondered whether it mattered, this is your reminder. Impact often shows up later, wearing a different face. Recognition that isn't pursued tends to arrive with integrity intact. But here's the twist most don't anticipate. Recognition, when it settles in, creates a new kind of pressure. Expectations rise, eyes stay longer, and the story others tell about you begins to take a shape of its own. Manuel hadn't asked to be seen, yet now being seen would open a door he never planned to walk through, and on the other side of that door was a possibility that pain alone could never have unlocked. There are moments when pain stops being something you endure and starts becoming something you can translate. Manuel didn't plan for that shift. It happened slowly, almost accidentally, the way meaningful changes usually do. People kept asking him to tell the story, not just what happened that night, but what happened before it. The waiting, the doubt, the choice to stay when leaving would have been easier. At first, Manuel resisted. He wasn't a storyteller by trade. His hands were more familiar with rope and soil than with paper and ink. But there was something persistent in those requests, especially from the younger ones. They weren't asking for drama, they were asking for understanding. And that made all the difference. So he began to write, not eloquently, not perfectly. He wrote the way he lived, honestly. Short sentences at first, memories that surfaced without warning. He wrote about Canella, yes, but also about the years that taught him patience, about moments when silence felt safer than truth, about how dignity, once compromised, is difficult to recover, but not impossible. When a local cultural association announced a small writing contest, Manuel almost ignored it. Contests belonged to people who felt entitled to win. Still, someone nudged him, a neighbor, a teacher, maybe a child who believed in him more than he believed in himself. He submitted the text without expectation. And then, something unexpected happened. The story resonated, not because it was polished, but because it was real. The judges didn't see a farmer trying to be a writer. They saw a human being translating experience into meaning. The prize wasn't large, but it was enough to plant a new idea, one that had nothing to do with revenge or compensation, and everything to do with continuity. Manuel didn't spend the money upgrading his life in obvious ways. He invested it in a space, a modest one, a room with shelves, a few benches, some donated books, a place where stories could rest and minds could stretch. It became a small rural library, though no sign announced it as such. People just knew. They came. They stayed. They talked. Here's where the lesson deepens. Most people think turning points are loud, that they involve sudden wealth or dramatic justice. But the most lasting turning points are quiet reallocations of meaning. Manuel didn't escape his past. He repurposed it. He turned pain into access, experience into guidance. For the viewer, this is practical. When life hands you something heavy, ask not just why did this happen, but what could this become? Write, speak, share. Whether through journaling, mentoring, or simply telling your story honestly to one person who needs it, translation is transformation. The space Manuel created wasn't impressive, but it was intentional. And intention, applied consistently, reshapes communities faster than money ever could. What he didn't know yet was that this quiet expansion, this new role he never sought, had caught the attention of someone who wasn't ready to be confronted by the mirror it held. And soon, the past would come looking for him, not with authority this time, but with an offer. Power rarely likes being questioned. It tolerates silence, obedience, and distance, but it struggles when confronted by quiet transformation. Don Bernardo didn't come looking for Manuel because he had suddenly grown sentimental. He came because something in the village had shifted, and that shift had a name, a story, a presence that no longer fit neatly into the hierarchy he was used to controlling. The visit wasn't announced. A fine horse at the gate, clean boots stepping onto uneven ground, a man accustomed to being received, not waiting. Manuel noticed the contrast immediately, not with resentment but with clarity. Once, this man had held all the leverage. Now, he carried something else, discomfort. They spoke politely at first. Weather, time. The past, referenced vaguely, as if it belonged to someone else. Then Don Bernardo gestured toward Canella. His eyes lingered, not with affection, but with calculation. He made an offer. A generous one. More money than the Mare had ever been worth in the marketplace. Enough to sound reasonable, enough to sound tempting. This is where many would have folded, because the offer wasn't just about money. It was about rewriting the story, about turning dignity into a transaction, about restoring the old order where value could be bought, transferred, and owned. Don Bernardo wanted Canella not because he needed her, but because owning her would quiet the narrative that had begun to expose him. Manuel listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't negotiate. When he spoke, his voice carried no triumph, no bitterness, only truth. "You're offering me money," he said calmly. "She gave me back my dignity." The silence that followed was heavy, not dramatic, revealing. Don Bernardo had no response prepared for that kind of currency. Money solves many problems, but it cannot compete with restored self-respect. In that moment, he wasn't rejected as a buyer. He was confronted as a man. This encounter carries a sharp lesson. Sometimes the people who once diminished you will return, not to apologize, but to reclaim control. They may offer better terms, kinder words, a revised version of the past. But wisdom knows this. Not every offer is an opportunity. Some are invitations to step backward. Manuel didn't refuse out of pride. He refused out of alignment. He had already crossed a threshold where dignity could no longer be priced. And that kind of refusal doesn't humiliate, it liberates. Don Bernardo left differently than he arrived, slower, quieter. The encounter didn't transform him instantly. Real change rarely happens on the spot. But it planted something uncomfortable inside him, a recognition he could no longer avoid. For anyone watching, this moment asks a hard question. What would you refuse today that you would have accepted yesterday? Growth isn't proven by what you gain, it's proven by what you no longer need. The story, however, wasn't finished yet. Because when one person chooses dignity over dominance, it doesn't just alter a relationship, it alters a system. And the ripple of that choice was about to reach far beyond Manuel and Canella, reshaping not just a man, but an entire way of seeing people. Transformation rarely announces itself with grand gestures. More often, It settles quietly into daily behavior, altering routines before it alters reputations. After Don Bernardo's visit, nothing dramatic happened overnight. There were no public apologies, no ceremonies, no speeches about change. And yet, something unmistakable had shifted, subtly, persistently, irreversibly. At the ranch, decisions began to sound different. Workers were spoken to, not spoken over. Mistakes were corrected without humiliation. The language of cost slowly made room for the language of people. No one said, "We're changing." They simply acted as if dignity had finally become part of the equation. That's how real cultural change works. It doesn't rely on slogans. It relies on repetition. Don Bernardo himself grew quieter, not weaker, more reflective. The encounter with Manuel had exposed something he could no longer ignore. His wealth had insulated him from consequence, but not from truth. And truth, once seen, tends to linger. He began to listen more than he spoke, to pause before deciding, to notice what and who had once gone unseen. Meanwhile, Manuel's influence expanded without effort. People didn't follow him because he demanded authority. They followed him because he embodied coherence. His words matched his actions. His past aligned with his present. That consistency made him trustworthy in ways charisma never could. Canella remained where she belonged, not as a trophy, not as proof, simply as herself, respected, cared for, present. Children visited her. Elders rested nearby. The space around her became something rare, a place where value wasn't measured, only recognized. This is where the story widens beyond individuals. When people start being treated as people instead of resources, entire systems recalibrate. Productivity improves, yes, but more importantly, meaning returns. And meaning is what sustains communities when incentives fail. For the viewer, this final act offers a powerful application. You don't need permission to change the culture around you. You need consistency. You need to decide what you will no longer tolerate, especially in yourself. Transformation begins the moment dignity becomes non-negotiable. Manuel never aimed to reform the ranch. He simply refused to abandon his values when it would have been convenient. And that refusal became contagious. It always is. Integrity spreads quietly, person to person, until what once felt radical begins to feel normal. The world often tells us that systems are too big to challenge, that one person's choices don't matter. This story suggests otherwise. It shows that when one individual chooses alignment over advantage, the ripple reaches farther than intention ever could. The injustice that began this journey had tried to reduce Manuel to a number. The transformation that followed restored people to their names. And once that happens, once a community remembers how to see human beings again, the question is no longer what was lost, but what can finally be built. By now, this story has done something quiet but irreversible. It has shifted the way value feels, not the kind you calculate, but the kind you recognize. And that's important, because once you see value differently, you can't unsee it. The question is no longer whether the world treats people unfairly. We already know it does. The real question is what you will do now that you're aware of it. Manuel's story isn't powerful because everything worked out neatly. It's powerful because he made decisions before outcomes were guaranteed. He chose dignity when it cost him comfort. He chose patience when bitterness would have felt justified. And he chose care when abandonment was the logical option. Those choices didn't just change his circumstances, they changed his character. And character, whether we like it or not, always shapes destiny. So here's a question worth sitting with. Where in your life have you accepted less than you deserved and called it realism? Maybe it was a job that slowly convinced you to shrink. Maybe it was a relationship where your effort was never quite enough. Or maybe it was the way you've been speaking to yourself, measuring your worth only by what you produce, not by who you are. This story invites you to apply its lesson in simple, concrete ways. Start by paying attention to what you usually ignore. Listen longer, dismiss less quickly, care more deliberately. If there's someone in your life who's been overlooked, an elderly relative, a struggling colleague, a version of yourself you've been neglecting, choose presence over convenience. Small acts, done consistently, reshape entire narratives. Ask yourself, what have I been tempted to abandon just because it hasn't paid back yet? What decision would I make today if dignity, not fear, was my compass? Change doesn't begin with dramatic declarations. It begins with refusal. Refusal to dehumanize, refusal to reduce people to numbers, refusal to believe that usefulness defines worth. When enough people make that refusal, cultures change, systems shift, and futures quietly realign. Before you leave, I want you to engage, not just with this video, but with yourself. Leave a comment answering this. What is something or someone you see differently now? That reflection matters more than you think. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. That small action helps us grow, yes, but more importantly, it helps spread stories that remind people of their dignity in a world that often forgets it. And if you know someone who's been treated like they no longer matter, share this video. Sometimes one story is enough to interrupt years of silence. Remember this, the world will keep offering deals that look fair and feel empty. You don't have to accept them. You get to choose what you stand for, what you protect, and what you refuse to trade away. Because in the end, the greatest transformations don't begin when the world changes. They begin when someone decides they will no longer abandon what still deserves care.